Hello, MCW fans. I'm Tara, and you're joining us for Backstage Pass. My guest today is Duke the Dumpster Droese. You may remember him from the 90s in WWF at the time. Thank you for joining us today.
I appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So you joined us here tonight for Bruiser Strong, and I was able to get some time with you before the show started to kind of catch up and see what you've been doing since your time in WWE. Well, of course, it was WWF then.
Of course. Yeah, it's a lot of things have happened, a lot of craziness. But these days, what I am doing is I work for an adult recovery court program in Tennessee where we help individuals facing jail and prison time and try to kind of teach them how to go back to living a normal life. So that's kind of the large part of what I do now. And then I do, some of the wrestling stuff like the appearances and stuff like that. But my wrestling days have been long over. They're long over. I've only got 1 foot left. That's my wrestling legacy, I always like to say, jokingly, of course. But yeah, after I left the WWF, it was some pretty crazy years. I wrestled in a couple other places. I went and worked for Big Otto back in like 97, 98 in Germany and Austria and stuff like that. But, and then I just kind of went away from the business for a long time. And it was probably about 2017 I started doing appearances again.
Oh, okay. You're from Florida, correct?
Well, I grew up in Florida. Yeah, I
Ah,
grew up
okay.
there for about 30 years of my life. I was born in Lodi, California, but like at the age of 4, our whole family moved over to Florida. And so, yeah, that's where I grew up. And that's where I started wrestling and everything. I mean, I did amateur wrestling in high school, and then I got into a professional wrestling school and started learning still in high school, actually.
That's why I brought up Florida, because that's such a hotbed for wrestling. And it's interesting to learn that's also where you got your start as well.
Yeah, the funny thing is that the independent scene was so different in those years. It was more like you were lucky if you got 1 or 2 shows a month in just that South Florida area. Now, you could travel up Florida, or in my case, I went and did some tours in the Caribbean, like especially the Bahamas. But you would find shows wherever you could. But yeah, it was a lot different. Now there's shows, all over the state, like every night of the week practically.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I went down there in 2017 for WrestleMania, and there were shows for the entire week. I mean, it was everywhere you went. Someone was wearing a wrestling shirt. We went to Disney, of course, and there were plenty of people. Rode Space Mountain, and everybody's going, woo, the whole time. But yeah, I was surprised by the number of indie shows that were going on that whole WrestleMania week, really that month. I mean, it was a lot.
yeah, usually there's a lot of stuff going on like that around WrestleMania, of course. But I think just in general, even during the times of COVID and all the other things going on in this country and in the world right now, we've still seen a bit of an uptick in professional wrestling shows, especially at what would be called the independent level. But when you look around you, are all of these places really, truly independents? I mean,
Right.
look at MCW. I don't know if I would call this necessarily an independent anymore because you guys are putting on a
Thank
big
you.
show here. So the scene has just changed so much, but it's a great thing to see because ex-wrestlers or wrestlers love to see other wrestlers always have places to go and work. That's the most important thing.
That's such a good point. The more quality promotions that are out there, the better it is for everybody. It's sometimes you hear about in different territories, there's, that competition. Oh, if you work for that company, you can't work for us. I mean, it's like so childish, and it doesn't benefit anybody.
Right, and that's going to happen, even at the independent level, or, you hear all the constant bickering that goes on at some of the bigger companies as well. But that's just, it's the entertainment industry. It's driven at a lot of times. It's driven by these egos of individuals who have worked very hard all their lives to accomplish this thing called professional wrestling, and they would all like to think they are the best, and a lot of them are great. And you're always going to see clashes in different ways. It's just the entertainment industry. That's the way it is. There's a lot of rejection involved, but there's also, for the ones that survive in this business, they learn instinctively how to get themselves over. Right. And when you learn how to do that, you don't have to worry about butting heads with somebody, and everybody's going to want you to come work for them. And generally speaking, if you're really that good, promoters are not going to say you can't work for this or can't work for that. They're going to work with you.
Right.
I've seen that happen too.
Right. Speaking of some of the bigger companies that you mentioned, I was reading something somewhere about the Undertaker had said that he thought wrestling today was soft. And if I'm not mistaken, did you agree with that? Or what do you think about the wrestling world today?
I've had that question before. Did you ask me?
No, I didn't. I just was doing a little research, and I happened to come across another interview, I guess, that you had done. And I saw that you had some comments about the Undertaker's thoughts on wrestling being kind of soft.
I think he has a point to the degree that the proving grounds in professional wrestling have changed. How people pay their dues has changed a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, when I was finishing college at the University of Miami, I was wrestling on the side here and there, wherever in pro wrestling. And what my plan was is to get into my 1978 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, which was broke down. It couldn't make it 3 blocks, let alone 3 states. And I was going to drive around the country and find jobs and find work.
Yeah.
And work for nothing and do whatever I had to do to get in this business. Yeah. That's kind of the way it was. Of course, that was during the territory age, and it's different now. But now there's major wrestling promotions that have their own training facilities and things of that nature that are teaching people every facet of the business. I mean, I remember back in the day, you would go to a wrestling school and you would learn the wrestling part, right? But then as far as all the other aspects, the business side of it and cutting promos and things like that, you would have to learn by getting the experience in front of people and doing shows.
Right. Yeah, we do actually do that here. Our training center has promo night class on Tuesday nights, so everybody goes through it. They have homework assignments, the whole 9 yards, because that's such an important part of the character too.
Absolutely.
People can be a great wrestler, but if you don't have a character that the people are gonna attach to, it's
There's a whole lot more to it than just having some fancy wrestling moves. That's absolutely the truth.
Exactly.
And you do have to have a connection with the fans, and that usually shows itself through your abilities to cut a promo. So that's good. Yeah, it's definitely. You can tell this place is top notch. I have no doubt about it. I can just see when I walked in the door, all the guys practicing in the ring were in really good shape. So that's first inkling I had that this wasn't like a, independent promotion. Right. But this studio is amazing.
Thank you.
I walked into this place, I went, wow. This is not an independent, but this is a great studio, and I'm looking forward to the show tonight.
Oh, thank you. This actually is also where we do our podcast. And do you still have your podcast, or I know you?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the short answer.
All right.
Yes, I still do. I do this podcast called Trash Cam Live, and we're still kind of working and building it slowly, but. We got to get in there and talk about everything. Yeah. And we do talk some wrestling, certainly, in the current events, of course. But it's very fan interactive. It's live. It's great. Live streamed on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. But I'm also getting ready to, I say start, but restart. I have another podcast, a recovery podcast.
That's what I'm
throwing around different names, and I think I'm going to call it Trashed the Recovery Podcast.
Oh, I love that. So it was called Road to Recovery, correct?
Yes, I was doing it, the Road to Recovery with another individual, but we stopped doing that podcast, and I just kind of wanted to branch out and do something on my own. I felt like it was important, so it could be mine. Because I've always worked with other people on stuff like podcasts, but I realized, I heard of all people, of course, I heard Joe Rogan say one day on his show, you got to do your own thing. You got to start your own thing. You got to build your own thing. Then it's yours. Yeah. And so that's when I made the decision. It's a little bit slower, but that's okay because you learn everything yourself. You make some mistakes. You grow, and then it's all yours.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Right. Well, that sounds like such an interesting approach, and the. Recovery was really important in our MCW world here too. You joined us here tonight for Bruiser Strong, and that is a person who also battled addiction. And he had started in the wrestling business years ago, took some time off, came back and became that role model and became that locker room leader. And he really just gave everything back 110%, you know. And so everybody that, you know, got to train with him, work with him here, you know, today, knew him in that phase of his life. And it was great to see him give back so much. So I think that that is such a worthy cause that you're doing. And, you know, that I'm going to check it out and listen to it. Do you have an anticipated return to the airwaves date?
We don't have the date yet, but we are. We're figuring the time's going to be Friday nights at 7. It'll be 8 p.m. Eastern time on Fridays. So coming soon. Okay. Very soon. We're just kind of putting it together. I got another co-host with that's also in recovery. Got a lot of lived experience himself. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, that's great. I'm definitely going to check that out. Fridays are usually a good night for me to, you know, take in some kind of entertainment because we're not usually having shows.
Right.
So great. I want to circle back for a second. You were talking about character. Okay. Now, your character came in an era when it was like the gimmick era. And
absolutely.
We'll get to the gimmick battle royal that you wound up doing later. But when you were doing the trash can gimmick on your own, right? And
yes, down in Florida, doing those independent shows part-time. Like I said, when I was still in college, I had one of my buddies in college gave me this name. He said, "You should be Rocco Gibraltar." And I said, that is the coolest name I've ever heard in my life. I said, but I got to figure out a way to use it because I knew at that time, just like you just said, really Vince McMahon was looking at characters, cartoonish, larger than life characters. And I thought of the garbage man, Rocco Gibraltar. And I wrestled as the garbage man, Rocco Gibraltar, for the better part of a year and a half, almost 2 years before I ended up getting a break with the WWF. But it was hand-delivered gimmick right to Vince McMahon. And, of course, all they did was change the name so they could own the licensing rights, of course. But I brought him the gimmick, ready-made gimmick, and he loved it, which I figured he would because I could tell by the characters he was putting on TV at the time that was right up his alley, and it worked out. So it got me in there. So
that's what you needed. Yes. You needed to stand out so that you could get your foot in the door. You also, you know, kind of introduced that hardcore with that hardcore style with that trash can shot from Jerry Lawler.
And incidentally, of course, which was a running theme in my short career at the WWF, I got hit with my own garbage can. But yes, that was what some would say is the first instance of hardcore. And me and Lawler kind of got in trouble for that because
he had to apologize, right?
Well, yeah, he had to kind of, you know, kayfabe apologize on TV. But when we did it initially, we kind of asked, but we didn't ask because it was live TV. Mm-hmm. And he asked me if he could hit me with the garbage can. He was supposed to just jump me, and he asked if he could hit me, and I said, yeah. I was like, yeah, that'll fire up this angle really good. And so he asked the one person in the back that we knew would say yes, Blackjack Lanza. He was the road agent in the back, and we asked him, can we use this gimmick and do the garbage can shot over the head? And he goes, screw it. Just do it. It's live television.
Right, you can't take it back.
No, and so we did it, and then as soon as I got back from the King's Court segment after the, you know, getting hit with the garbage can, there was people just milling all around, and Shane McMahon ran right up to me, and he goes, "What the hell happened?" I go, "Why? We just kind of planned to do something to spice up the angle a little bit," and he was like, "Okay, but who told you to do it?" I go, "Well, we kind of planned it together," and it was just crazy because then Gorilla Monsoon immediately came back on the live airwaves and apologized for it. And then they had Jerry Lawler do this goofy apology thing the next week on TV. And I was just like, it's killing the whole thing. And then we ended up not even getting a pay-per-view out of it. So, but I take a little pride in that people are saying it was the first instance of hardcore wrestling.
I think you might be right.
I enjoy that.
Good. Now, fast forward a few years after, several years after that, you came back to WWE at this time for the Gimmick Battle Royal.
Yes.
So what were your thoughts about that?
Well, it was an interesting situation. I was down in Florida, and things had gotten kind of crazy with me. We talked about addiction issues and stuff. But I was working back for this local promotion down in Florida at the time. I actually had a wrestling ring and a school. I would train their guys, but I was barely hanging on.
Yeah.
And one of the guys involved with the school came up to me and said, "Did you hear? They're doing a gimmick battle royal." And I was like, "No, I didn't hear." And he goes, "You need to call the office." And I called Bruce Pritchard, and he goes, "Let me call you right back." And they called me back, and they said, "Yeah, we can use you in it." Absolutely.
Great.
So I got in on this thing. Let me tell you something. Never in my days have I seen a large group of old-ass, gimmicked up men yelling and screaming and stomping and kicking, and Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik were just screaming at each other, these high-pitched screams. And Brother Love and Jim Cornette were hiding in the corner because they didn't want to get hurt by anything. And the one-man gang, and then Doink the Clown came from every gimmick you could possibly imagine. And I was just at one point standing in the middle of the ring, and I go, how in the hell did I get here? But it was WrestleMania. It was the Alamo Dome. It was 65,000 people. That was
got your pay-per-view moment.
Amazing thing to walk out into. But yeah, it was interesting. It was fun.
Do you have a favorite gimmick out there, like over all time? Like, who's done a gimmick that you just thought, wow, that's really clever?
I'll tell you who I always really loved was when I was growing up. And even into the 80s, he came into WWF, was the Missing Link. The Missing Link. And his best years, he was like older. He was like in his late 50s, 60s, and in great shape and wrestling. But it was just that look. He had 2 poofs of hair here and 1 poof of hair there, and the blue and the stuff around his eyes. And it was believable.
I remember.
It was He used to smash a chair over his own head, and you're like, this guy's really crazy. So I thoroughly enjoyed watching The Missing Link whenever I could get a chance.
All right. Wow. I hadn't thought about him in years and years.
Yes.
Great. Well, I know that was the time I grew up watching wrestling, and I just loved that kind of stuff. You know, like for me, that was sports entertainment. You know, it was entertaining to me, but also there was wrestling involved. So, you know, I grew up watching soap operas. So, you know, I mean, it was an easy transition.
That's what wrestling is, yes.
Yeah, exactly. It was an easy transition. But yeah, I enjoyed all that stuff. Watching I would always look for the Royal Rumbles to see what gimmick match they were going to throw in there. You know, like who was going to come out. You know, that was always my favorite. So when the gobbledygooker would come out or something in the Royal Rumble, like I fought for that. I loved it.
Yes.
So.
Well, gimmicks they had, that's for sure.
Yes, they did.
I'll never forget that gobbledygooker thing because, you know, it was going back and forth the weeks building up to that show during Thanksgiving in that year was it's going to be Ric Flair in there or it's going to be The Undertaker in there. They were kind of coming at all these ideas of who it was going to be. Me and Mark Callis, at least, we didn't know about The Undertaker yet. But a guy in an ugly chicken/turkey suit who is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, one of the Guerrero brothers, and they put him in a chicken/turkey suit, and he comes out and starts dancing around with Mean Gene, and then you practically never saw him again.
Yeah.
They realized pretty quickly that wasn't a great idea, but yeah, it was interesting. Not all the ideas can be great ones.
No,
they're not all home runs.
This is true. Well, I've enjoyed this little walk down memory lane. So, can you tell the fans are you active on social media, and can you tell the fans how they can find you, check out your upcoming podcast?
Yes, I'm all over the place on social media, because I don't know how to do it very well. But it all originally started with my Facebook page, believe it or not, that nobody looks at Facebook. But
I use Facebook.
My Mike Droese, it was my personal Mike Droese page, actually. But I started there, and then I branched out. And I've got an Instagram, Duke the Dumpster Official. Okay. I've got a YouTube channel, Duke the Dumpster Official. I've now got a TikTok channel. Ooh. Please come and subscribe to that, because apparently that's the new cool thing with the kids. TikTok, Duke the Dumpster Official. And I got a Twitch account.
All right.
Guess what the name is? No. It's Trashcam Live. I don't know why I did that. You see, that's what I mean. I have no clue. I need people to help me with my social media. So if you're out there, please give me a ring and just holler at me because I need some help.
There you go. Well, you heard that. So, fans, I hope you enjoyed this sit-down interview, and thank you so much for joining us here on Backstage Pass.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.